recording. There we go. All right, everybody. I'm starting to see people come in. So welcome to Virtual Warwicks. As you see, I don't have my Warwick sign behind me because I'm actually in Chicago right now.
That's so
Yes.
cool. I love that city.
I know. Well, we're actually in the suburbs. So I'm in LaGrange. My daughter and her wife and my grandchildren are here. So so I'm visiting my
Thanks for
So
taking an
grandkids.
fun.
hour out from that to hang out with
Absolutely.
us.
Wouldn't miss it. I was telling everybody, I was telling Joy in the green room before we started, and you too, Rachel. I love doing the virtual events. I think it's really fun to be able to highlight authors and give voice when they can't get to where we are, which brings us to Joy. Welcome to Virtual Warwicks. Where are you calling in
Thank
from
you.
today?
I'm home here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I was just telling y'all that I was on a long, long road trip today. I was in Huntsville, Alabama last night with my friend Kim Brock, and we had a
Who we
blast.
love.
But
We love Kim Brock, another
Fun.
great novelist.
Well, the weather here in
so,
Chicago is wonderful. It's about 73 degrees and gorgeous. How's the weather in North Carolina?
well, it's really nice, except it's been storming on and off all day today. So we've been looking at the weather. It's beautiful, 70 something, sunny.
Perfect. And Rachel,
Sounds like
I'm
it
assuming,
matches where you are.
yeah,
I'm in
How
Toronto,
about you,
and you know
Rachel?
what? I'm trying to speak American in temps. I'm really bad
Oh,
at
yeah.
it, but I would say that we're mid 80s this week.
oh, it's a
Wow.
little
So,
warm.
Uh-oh,
like
that's
blast
that's
of
getting up there for
summer.
you though, Rachel, because you don't really like warm weather.
I
So
hate
yeah.
the summer, but I realize it is a part of life. Um,
Yeah,
no, I'm a fall and winter girl. I'm an Icelandic Canadian. Like I
yeah.
have Viking blood. I give me the snow, but it is nice, and everybody's out eating on patios. And oh my gosh, Anissa
Anissa.
Armstrong, we
Anissa.
love her.
Hi,
She's
Anissa.
Yeah.
Anissa. Sorry, I've never said your name aloud before, but you are such an amazing supporter of everyone's
So
books. So
many
that's
authors. I even
wonderful.
see your name everywhere. So
I
it's
know.
So
wonderful.
fun fact,
Anissa.
Anissa actually was in conversation with me at my launch here in Charlotte. It
Oh,
was
that's
great. We had a great
This
time.
never
She's a dear
sucks.
friend. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Wonderful.
fantastic. Well, welcome. I'm glad and anybody else wants to pop in and let us know where that's always fun. So let me get this ball rolling here so that we can get to this wonderful conversation. So Rachel and Joy are going to chat for about 35 minutes, and then we'll pop on with any questions that you might have. I know everybody knows this already, but I have to do my due diligence. If you scroll at the bottom of your screen, it might be different on different computers, but there's a Q&A button. Pop your questions into the Q&A, and I'll field those to them when they're done with their conversation. Over in the chat, we're going to just have some fun chatting if you want to do that. But I'll also be putting in there how to order this book that they're going to talk about tonight, and another book that Joy is got coming out. Is it out right now at the same time? Is that
Next
right?
month.
Yeah.
Next
So
month. And I
next
will
month.
at the very end of our conversation mention it because we're talking about Star of Camp Green, but I mean, why have one Joy Callaway book when you can have
When you can
two?
have two, and you can always pre-order from Warwick. So that's always the thing that we can do. So that's wonderful. So let me introduce these wonderful authors and ladies, and then I will go away for a little while. So Joy Callaway is the international best-selling author of What the Mountains Remember, All the Pretty Places, The Grand Design, Sister Secrets, and the Fifth Avenue Artist Society. As she said, she lives in Charlotte, North Carolina with her family. She's here today, as Rachel said, to talk about her new book, The Star of Camp Green, a novel of World War I. Joining Joy is our wonder. There it is. Beautiful cover. I love the cover. Joining Joy is our wonderful Rachel McMillan. Rachel is a literary agent and author who lives in Toronto, but that's all she wanted me to say. But I'm sorry, Rachel. I have to tell you, you're absolutely one of the best champions of authors, and we adore having you as our interlocutor for these virtual events. So we want to thank you for that. So with that, ladies, have a great conversation, and I'll see you in a little while.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Oh my
Rachel,
goodness.
I'm so excited to be here with you. It's the
This book
best.
is so fun. And when I found out that Joy was writing it, I'm a huge fan of her books, and I'm a huge fan of how much she loves where she's from and how she infuses a sense of her love of her hometown of Charlotte in this. But also, I'm a huge theater nerd, like the kind of theater nerd who will go to London or New York or Chicago just to see shows. And so this history of Broadway and theater and music in a very little told part of World War I history in America was really fascinating to me. And I have to say up front, you mentioned Taylor Swift a lot when you're talking and positioning this book for people. So are you a Swiftie, or are you just like, this was like the Taylor Swift of the time, just trying to find a
Okay,
way?
so here's the tea on that.
Yeah.
I like Taylor. I'm not a Swiftie, I wouldn't say. I like her. I see her talent. I like her songs, but I'm
Oh
not
yeah.
Swiftie.
Yeah.
But our dear friend Jenny Walsh, another fabulous author, read
Sassy.
this book, and she was like, "Joy, Calla is like the World War I Taylor Swift," and I was like, "Yeah, she is. That's totally true." So that's where that came from. Is she was like, "This is basically what would have happened if Taylor Swift." Was performing at World War I Army training camps, if she had contracted Spanish flu and got overheard an Army secret and then got stuck at a camp under false pretenses. Like that's what this book is. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So
That's so cool. I'm the same. I
yeah,
wouldn't call myself a Swiftie, but I respect her and I know she brings people a lot of joy.
yeah.
Oh, haha, joy, joy. Um, and I think it's a great way to position the book for people in showing that this was the level of celebrity that Calla had. Um,
Hmm.
and the USO in America, American lore for a lot of us is really rooted more in what we know about World War II in terms
Right.
of like Bob Hope and Marilyn Monroe and Hollywood Canteen and going and cheering on the troops. But this is a very different story. And where did you stumble upon this? Is Camp Greene real? Are you basing it on a camp and you just renamed it? Obviously you've got these places that you are so in love with in and around where you live, and you write them into
Hmm.
your stories, what the mountain remembers, like obviously um, the Greenbrier. Tell us about how you stumbled upon Camp Greene.
Well, Rachel, as we historical fiction novelists know, we get inspiration from all kinds of places. But really quickly, I'll try to be as brief as possible in this. About when I was on tour for Secret Sisters, which was my second book, I actually did a local panel here in Charlotte, and it was with two other authors, Tommy Tomlinson and Sarah Crosland. And Sarah had just come out with a book called Secret Charlotte. And I grew up in Charlotte in this city, and I started reading her book and realizing how much I really didn't know about the history of the place I call home. And Camp Greene, which was a World War I Army training camp, was one of the secret Charlotte chapters. And I was immediately transfixed by it. So to give you all a little bit of background about what was happening in America during World War I or right before World War I, in the military. So there were about 133,000 active soldiers in the army before America entered World War I. And of course, there were 3 million that served in World War I at the end of the war. So America really didn't have an organized army that could, do anything for the war effort. And so when we entered the war, what the army did was they had, again, a little tiny army, and then they had to raise up a bunch of soldiers to serve. And so they decided that they were going to come up with 32 army training camps that would be around the country. And so Charlotte was a really little town at that point. It was only 45,000 people in 1917. And Charlotte saw it as an opportunity, heard about the training camps, and saw it as an opportunity to, boost their economy and to kind of put Charlotte on a national stage if they could win the Army camp. And so they went to bat and really campaigned to win this army base, and they won. And so Charlotte was chosen because of the climate, the mild climate. They were chosen because there were rail systems that were easily accessible. It was chosen because there was a large amount of land. So these army training camps, this one in particular was 7,000 acres, which was massive. It was the size of some cities back then. It housed 60,000 soldiers, so it was more than double the size of
Wow.
Charlotte at the time. And it was, something that we don't hear much about growing up here. I had no idea. It also was something that was very short-lived. So Camp Greene actually only existed from 1917 to 1919. And then after the war, the Army just came in and just took it all. To give you guys an example of kind of like, or a little rundown of what Camp Greene, the scope of it, I guess. I said it was 7,000 acres, but it also had
Oh
practice
my
trenches that
gosh.
were dug by French military that came in and dug these trenches. They had a bakery, they had a post office, there was a YMCA, there was a library, there was a YWCA hostess house if wives or girlfriends or, mothers or sisters wanted to come visit soldiers stationed here. There were, rifle ranges that were, from in a different county that encompassed the army camp. I mean, it was enormous. And the soldiers actually, at different other army camps, they were stationed in barracks, but at Camp Greene, they were actually stationed in tents. And I wish I have actually photos here I can show you, but they were put in tents. And actually, the Spanish flu epidemic was going on during that time. And I want to say sometimes that, it may have been a good thing that they were in tents rather than in barracks because, of course, it might have added to the airflow.
Yeah.
And that could have helped. But it was a massive, massive camp. And so I wanted to explore that. So that's how I found out about Camp Greene. But I don't know about you, Rachel, but sometimes I'll come across a little tidbit of history and I think it's really interesting, but I really have no clue who the main character is. And so I'll just be like, that's cool, but who knows
I
who that's going
file it in
to be?
a folder. It's called
Yeah.
Book Ideas, and it has all these little things, and then you wait for the moment where it's like, okay, I think I can
Yeah, because
use
you
this.
sometimes just have no idea. You're like, who's the mouthpiece for this? Like, who's going to tell this story? And sometimes we don't know. And then sometimes then it hits you, right? And so what happened to me was I was doing newspaper archive research and I was looking in New York newspapers for a different idea I had when I came across Elsie Janis. And I bet you know who Elsie Janis is because you're a Broadway buff.
I do, but and I also like I've always been a huge fan of studying the history of American theater.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you mentioned this because I did want to ask eventually, and this is a great segue to this. Can you tell people who Calla is based on? Because it's really cool.
Yeah, so as we do, we are trying to figure out who the right person to tell the story is. And just to back up a little, so Camp Greene, like all the other Army training camps in America, they had what was called a Liberty Theater. And at Camp Greene, the Liberty Theater was a tent, just like the Army, I guess the lodging for the soldiers. But at other camps, it was a legitimate theater. And most of the time, the USO didn't exist back then. So most of the time, it was soldiers entertaining each other. That was kind of what they were used for. And on occasion, you'd have like Mary Pickford or Charlie Chaplin come in and kind of maybe say a little something about, thank you for
Yay,
for your
morale! Yeah.
service and woo. But they weren't doing shows or anything. So when I came across the Liberty Theater at Camp Greene, that was always a place of interest for me. And then when I stumbled upon Elsie Janis in some newspaper archives by accident, um, I was transfixed and I was like, you know what? That is my main character. It just hit me all at once. So Elsie Janis was a wonderful and popular Broadway star back in the World War I era. And Calla, my main character, is based on her. They have the same backstory. So to give a little bit of the backstory of Elsie, when around the time that the war broke out, Elsie was actually in England and she was on the London stage and she was performing in a show with a fellow stage actor who she fell in love with, and they were engaged. And so when the war breaks out, her fiance actually ends up being called to the front, and he goes and he swiftly passes away. And so she is devastated. And so she goes back to New York and she throws herself into her art and into onto the stage because that's really the only place she can find some peace from her grief. And so she's performing on stage and throwing herself into work when America enters the war. And when America enters the war, she just feels like she has to do something. And she wants to do something to honor her fiance's memory. And the only thing she can think of doing is going to entertain the troops at the front is what she wants to do to boost morale on their way in to fight because she knows that her fiance was not one of the people going into war that kind of was, I guess, mentally prepared for war. I think people, like,
Yeah.
there were soldiers, obviously, just like everybody. If you took a big group of people and put them in front of a traumatic situation, everybody's going to come at that with a different mindset. And her fiance was someone who was a creative and an empath and a gentle soul. And so he did not, it was terrifying for him to go into war. And he would write to her and say, I wish I would have heard a song, or I missed the stage with you, and things like that. And so when when America enters the war, she thinks to herself, I need to do something about this. I need to um, give them a song. And so she goes to General Pershing and she asks him, she says, can I please go to the front? I'll finance my own tour. I'm gonna bring my mom with me. Can I go to the front lines? Can I entertain the troops there? And he quickly says, absolutely not. But he says, if you want to give it a try, you can tour through the American Army training camps, and if that goes well, then maybe we'll reconsider. And so she goes and she tours through the American Army training camps. And at first, I thought that I was going to write a piece of biographical fiction on Elsie because she was
Hmm.
fascinating. Ultimately, she did make it to the front and she toured there for a couple years. And I've read her diaries from that time in her life. And she did it on her own dime. And she and her mother would perform, like 2 miles only from the front lines. And she'd perform on overturned wagons and, like, blown out cars and things like that. It didn't matter. Um, but the problem was, what happened is when I started writing, and Rachel, we know this happens all the time with us, is I started writing her story and I was at Camp Green. She was on the stage at Camp Green singing, and she kept getting Spanish flu, which I kept reading about in the Charlotte archives was such a problem at Camp Green. And so that's where the deviation happened. And I know that you and I are the same in this. I feel that I wanted to tell Elsie's story, but if my character is not cooperating, there's usually a reason for that. And so what I decided to do instead was let Calla be inspired by Elsie instead
Yeah.
of,
Because
use
then you have a
Elsie.
broader perimeter to work with, and you're still
Yeah,
honoring Lucy and opening the door so people can go and learn more about her.
right.
You also have a little bit more creative control on the history you want to tell without the.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I feel weird too. If I'm writing about a real person, I want to make sure like I'm as accurate as I possibly can be. Because I think when we write biographical fiction, what I tend to do is just fill in the unknowns in history with fiction. I don't tend to add things I know were not right or not factual about
Yeah.
their lives. It just, everyone's different, but for me, I'm just always like, oh, I don't know.
I
I feel weird about
haven't.
that.
The only time I've used actual figures in history in my books is like as a side character,
Yeah.
Roosevelt, as a side character, Emma Goldman. In those cases, I could just have their dialogue be what they actually said. So they're on the periphery, but I'm too scared to write biographical fiction. I know some people, like our friend Jenny Walsh, like my friend Bryn Turnbull, they enjoy it because it gives you a very clear outline with
Yeah.
things to hit, which I think is fascinating. And I loved, I just did a book that came out in November with Janelle Sazelski, who also loves World War One, and Amy Runyon, called The Liberty Scarf. And I had found out that in obviously I knew a lot about World War One, I had a great great uncle in it and such, but that they had classical musicians that would follow the Belgian army around through the war to play the best music they could at the front. And so I really love this melding of art and warfare. But you do mention the Spanish flu, and it's a big deal in this time period. But also, I mean, is this your COVID response book? Because we've got a pandemic, we've got Calla trapped at Camp Green. Like did you feel that the pandemic experience, gosh, we're all sick of the pandemic, but I really wonder, um, was it able to give you like, I can write into this because it's not too long since I've experienced living through something that is kind of the closest we've had as a society to what the Spanish flu was in.
Yeah, actually, I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was, Rachel and I share an editor. So I
We
don't know if
do.
it was our editor who asked me this, or it was might have been the copy editor who asked me this, but we were going through, and so what struck me is that I was reading through the Charlotte newspaper archives, as I do, to get my research done, and I was reading how the city reacted to Spanish flu and the protocols, and I'd written in the correct protocols for Spanish flu, and it was funny because one of the editors said to me, "Is this real, or did you draw this from
Did you
COVID?"
just
Because
copy and paste?
they were the exact same
Yeah.
almost. So it was like our city shut down for a couple of days at a time. It wasn't as long as, we experienced a shutdown, but they did shut it down. And I thought that was impressive actually, considering they didn't know much about the transmission of disease back then.
Yeah, they didn't
Um,
have Facebook to tell you
they had no
everything.
idea, but they would do this thing where, I mean, it was masking. They wore masks. They
Yeah.
stayed 6 feet apart. Um, but the weird thing about it is like they definitely downplayed how many casualties they had. So they would say stuff like, "We had 3 casualties yesterday," when in reality they had like 35 casualties the day before. So it was um they did definitely try to help so that the city did not panic, but
Yeah.
it was not reported very well. And it was just interesting to read about that. I will say, as we know, Spanish flu, I have actually a letter, and it's from my great grandfather, and he's trying to get into Marshall University, which is my alma mater. And he got a response from the president. It said, we'd love to have you as a student. However, we're shut down for Spanish flu. When that, when the flu resolves, we can't wait to have you as a student. And I was like, that's, incredible. But the interesting thing about it is Spanish flu, of course, attacked the young and the healthy
Yeah.
first and foremost. And so I thought that was really
That
interesting
is so,
because,
that's an interesting part of the book because COVID was kind of like
yeah,
everybody
all
across
over.
the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, that especially when you were that level of danger, the level of danger of the war, the men at Camp Green who are on the precipice of possibly going somewhere where they're going to lose their life, but
Hmm.
also this rampaging, like that sense of urgency throughout. And one of the things I love, and that I think a lot of authors are asking at this moment, like authors do whenever there's a lot going on in the world, is what is the what is my voice doing? Like, what
Hmm.
is the point of my romance novel or my historical novel when people are going through these really big moments? And I
Hmm.
think that this book, to give you a little sales pitch, readers, proves that the way that we get through things is through focusing on art and representation. And Kala is a symbol of things getting better. I mean, it's very fascinating to me that just in a few years, America will be in the roaring 20s and it will just be party, party all the time. Um, and just how this cloud, she pierces through it because she does bring something. And this is a book that proves that we relate more to history than I think we realize when
Hmm.
we go through moments like the pandemic or when
Yeah.
we live through wars that are all around us. It becomes more it becomes more identifiable. It's not too far in the past. Was
Yeah.
there any challenge in trying to capture the balance of the theatricality, but also, it has a beautiful cover and it's a beautiful story, but there is a bittersweet melancholy to
Hmm.
the story. How do you, because you're an optimistic, lovely ray of sunshine, whose
Thanks,
other
friend.
book coming out next month is Sing Me Home to Carolina, which is amazing. But how do you make sure that your stories about these amazing people living through trying times never get too melancholy?
I think it's the way that, I mean, I think the characters I write tend to be, I think if they're people ask all the time, are our characters us? And I think they're always a part of us, and yet they're not us at the same time.
Yeah.
But I would say that the part of me that always tends to come out is the hope part. So I personally am somebody who I can't live in, doesn't matter what the situation is, I have to find that glimmer of light. I have to find the hope in it, no matter how dire it seems, because to me that's how I move forward in things. And that's how I can then say, I think when you're like mired in darkness and you're mired in fear, sometimes for certain people, it just paralyzes you. And it makes it so you can't use your gifts and you can't look around you and see what needs to be done. And instead, it makes you feel like, what's the point? So I think if you can, like my opinion is, and how I kind of live is if I can find that glimmer of hope, then I can steer my mind toward that. And in doing so, have the strength to look around and say, how can I use my gifts that I've been given in this situation? Just like Calla, Calla speaks a lot to the fact in the book that music is not going to end the war necessarily, and it's not going to get these guys out of this dire situation they're in, but it might lift their spirits for a moment, and maybe that's enough. And I looked, also at the response that even Charlotte had to the soldiers coming into town. And you had people taking soldiers home for Sunday dinner. And you had these women baking fresh donuts to pass out to the soldiers who were coming in from, so the army camps, they actually had people coming from, they weren't local. So we didn't have Charlotte men coming into the army camp. It was people
Right.
from New England and it was people from out west. And so you had these people coming in that had never seen this place before. And so the community said, you know what? We're going to greet them with kindness and with community, and we're going to let them, we're going to greet them at the train stations with hot donuts and with some song and with music, and with the idea that, we'll take them into our homes and they can, they're not home, but they can be a part of ours. And I think those little things, like you're saying, like those little things add up. And in a moment of panic or fear or, feeling like there's just no light at all, sometimes those little things can be those glimmers of hope. And I think I loved infusing that into my stories because, as we know, I'm writing about a world war. There's nothing wonderful about that at all, about
Mhm.
a world war. However, you look it's I think it was actually just powerful to see the community come together, like I said, and realize that, sometimes it's just the little things that can give us hope in the midst of a lot of darkness. And so, but you can always find that in my books, because that's just important to me as a person, I think.
Isn't she
That's how
just
I
the
live.
most aptly
So
named person? Joy? Like just so appropriate for who you are. And obviously music and hope and community are the hallmarks of Star of Camp Green, but just to spend a second on your upcoming book, Sing Me Home to Carolina, it's the same thing. We got
yeah.
music, we've got the power of community, we have a woman who is discovering who she is through, rediscovering her roots. Home base is a massive part of who you are, what you write, where we come from, why we're rooted there. I know that you research a crap ton for your historicals. What was it like to approach a contemporary story? Did you find you were using the same parts of your brain? Was it the same method of outlining, or did you, just get to play around a bit in a new way for this one?
Well, you know that we can't get away from history. Like it's just ingrained in
Hmm.
us. So just so y'all know, the book Send Me Home to Carolina is a completely different book than Star of Camp Green. So this book is contemporary romance. It is like
Yeah.
Schitt's Creek meets Heart of Dixie. It is a
It has
dramedy. If you're a fan of
country
that,
heart,
you're
is
gonna,
what I would say. Like
yeah,
it's
it's got country
just
music. Yeah. It's ridiculous and like funny in a funny way. It's great, but it also has a great romance to it and heartwarming moments too. And it was such a fun thing to do, to be able to write a story like
great.
this. I wanted to do it for a long time, and got the chance, and so was really really excited. And I tell people this a lot because I think it's so fun. I was inspired. So this book, basically, it's about an event planner and her parents' historic peanut farm is infertile. So she has to come home and try to help her parents figure out their next act. And as she's trying to help them figure it out, she ends up inadvertently running what the locals are calling the next Bluebird Cafe, which the Bluebird Cafe, if y'all aren't familiar, it's a bar in Nashville where people
I've been.
get
It's
discovered. Yeah,
iconic. It's so iconic.
it's super cool. And so she inadvertently, someone gets discovered at their barn during Founders Day. And so the locals are all like, oh my goodness, if you're a musician, you got to go to this barn. And so it becomes a whole thing. And in the meantime, as she's trying to navigate all that, she's kind of dealing with a love triangle. It's her first love is returned to town. He's a former MLB star who has a career-ending injury, and then the mysterious owner of the local hardware store. And it's just a fun book. But yeah, I mean, I used some of my I didn't do a lot of research for it. I got to really just create a town that I'd want to live in. But I did do a little bit, and the town, Mountain View, was founded by Nat King Cole's guitar player. It's a fictional guy who
Uh,
was
love
had
that.
just quit the band. He and his wife decided they were going to go back to their farm in Georgia when they're driving down, and this would have been, in the late 40s, early 50s. They're driving from New York to Georgia when they get stuck in the mud. It's a big torrential downpour. It's been raining for days, and their truck gets stuck midway between Charlotte, North Carolina, and Greenville, South Carolina, and they can't get out of the mud. And so they just decide to stay there. And they end up creating this town that they hope will be like a Camp David for musicians. And so, like downtown, if you can picture it, it has, music notes etched into the limestone. And, he's thinking, I'm going to invite all my friends and they can relax here and it'll be great. Such a music getaway place we can go. And it turns out that's not it at all. It ends up being a nice little farm town, but the music thing doesn't really catch on until now, right? Until Hattie comes back to town and inadvertently kicks off this new wave of music. But I loved adding that little color in. I don't think I could create a town that didn't have a really fun history to it, just because we love history and there's so many things we want to explore. And so, I had to add that in for color. But yeah, I got to make a lot of stuff up, and it was such a fun thing to do.
It's
Just
so
to
fun. It's
Yeah,
so fun to make stuff up. I write some, well, I haven't in a while because I've I wrote
you've been a
too
little
many books.
busy.
I wrote too many books too quickly, and I'm learning how to write books again. But I have written several contemporary romances set in Vienna, Austria, and there's always a musical theme to it. It's just we do the music thing, but you're doing country music, and I've done more of the classical stuff. And it's
We need to go on like a music tour, Rachel,
oh,
somehow,
I just think
you
that
know?
so many of us love to infuse what we love in real life into books.
Hmm.
And Sing Me Home to Carolina
Yeah.
is it's really going to be one of those books that everyone wants to read right now because it is a perfect summer community book that has a sense of nostalgia to it, even though it is contemporary. So I did see a few questions here, and we're at the 7:35 mark. So I'll bring Julie back in.
All
Um,
right.
Everybody, joy is going to be like everywhere forever. Like I every day when I'm on Instagram, I'm like, oh, there she is, there she is. Me and Kim Brock are literally everywhere. And it's awesome, like a dynamic duo, eh? I love you guys.
Oh,
Love
but
you.
I mean, this was so fun, and I absolutely love the idea of the new book. It's like Schitt's Creek. I mean, it just sounds so much
It
fun.
sounds so fun.
Okay, I
Yeah.
was honestly, and this is like, listen, y'all, if you read this book and you're like, it is not funny, I don't know what she's talking about, that's fine. But I just have to say that this was last summer I was editing it. And when you're editing things, we have read these books like, I don't even know
Oh,
how many
you
times,
can't
right?
even see it anymore.
You
It's
don't
like,
know.
what?
And
I
so
have no idea.
my husband came downstairs and I was reading a portion of this book, and I am like, he's like, what are you doing? And I was laughing so hard I was crying at myself that like,
How
and I,
wonderful.
I wanted to read it to him, and I was like, hold on a second, like, let me just get this together. I'll read you this section. And so I'm trying my best to like straighten up and read it to him. And it took me forever. So look, it made me laugh really, really hard. Hopefully, it makes y'all laugh and smile too. So that's the point. And, who knows?
But I think that's the best because I always ask authors, like, when I've done interviews or these kinds of things, it's just like, did you laugh at this? Because it's like, this was so funny. And so I love that you can make yourself laugh. So I think that
Yeah, you
that's
got to. I mean, even in the Star of Camp Green, we have the Star of Camp Green obviously is a World War book, but there are some really funny moments in there.
There's
There's
some
a zebra
great
cow.
banter. It's because I think that war books can get too heavy. People were still people. They were
Right.
still laughing and sarcastic. And,
right.
I grew up watching MASH, and
Hmm.
it's like it's hilarious because people are still people,
Right.
even
And they have
behind
and
the
that
board.
releases the tension. It has to, it has
Yeah.
to like help release that a little bit. Okay, so we do have some questions. So Anissa has the first one. So she wants to know which character came to you first, which character
Oh.
was the hardest to write, and do you have a favorite
Ooh.
character?
Oh.
Do you want me to
Thanks,
go over
Anissa,
those
for
again?
that brain buster. Let me think. Okay.
Brainbuster.
Which character came to me first? Which was the hardest to write? And what was the last one?
Favorite.
Favorite. Okay.
Ooh.
All right. So Kala came to me first. And hardest to write. Okay, I think it actually would be my like male main character, Jesse, because I had to figure out his backstory a little bit, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but basically he's also stuck at Camp Green for a certain reason. And so I had to figure out what his deal was. Like I knew he was gonna be from this area because I wanted to explore what it would have been like to be, he's stuck to, he doesn't want to be here, even though he's from here. And so I had to figure out what his deal was. And then let's see, my favorite character. So I didn't say this. So Calla, my main character, because she's stuck at Camp Green, she ends up forming friendships with these musician soldiers and also some of their wives because they're there, too, until they get shipped out. And that was inspired by actually Irving Berlin, who did that in his
Oh.
army camp in New York. And he actually was stationed in New York during World War One and found musicians and found actors, and he came up with some really great shows during that time. And some of his music was written during that time period. And so I thought that was so inspiring. And so I don't know if I can pick just one, but the cast of musicians that Kala encounters, I think are my favorite because it adds such color and such depth to the experience that you would have had in a camp because it's all these people with different personalities and different backgrounds coming together to create something really, really beautiful in the midst of a lot of darkness. And so absolutely loved them. But there's also a little nurse. Her name is Goldie, and she's Cala's nurse when she falls ill with Spanish flu. She's engaged to one of the musicians, and it was just fun to write her because she's again a nurse in World War One, and so that was an interesting thing to look at too, what that would have meant. So I don't know. I think the musicians have to be my favorite because they just were so fun to write and explore.
I love that. Yeah, and that's a great backstory on them too. Okay, this is coming from an anonymous attendee. If the story became a movie or a streaming series, who
Oh.
would you see playing the star, the main character?
Okay, so this is really easy actually. I have a friend. I have a friend who's a wonderful actress, and she's also been on Broadway, and her
Who
name's
I
Brandy
saw her
Burkhart.
on Broadway in Tale of Two
Yeah.
Cities in previews. Oh my
Wouldn't she
gosh.
be good?
Like when I found out that Joy, I was like, wait, I was once on Instagram, I was like, you know Brandy Burkhart in real life? She's amazing. She's
Yeah.
amazing.
So I sent it to her. She has it. I like would if it ever gets adapted someday, I'm gonna be like, please, will you please play her? Because she's just fabulous. She has the voice. She has the
Of
look.
a
She would be absolutely
freaking,
perfect.
a
Yeah.
voice of a freaking angel, and was also on
Yeah.
Heart of Dixie. for a lot
Yep.
of time. Cricket. Was her name Cricket on
Yep.
Heart of Dixie? It's
Cricket
been a
on Heart of
while.
Dixie. Yeah. So I think that was easy because I would definitely pick her to do it to star in
Oh
it. I think it'd be
wow.
I love it.
Look at
I
you
love
and
it.
your
And Rachel,
famous
I love that
friends.
you know her too.
great.
I am a certified Broadway geek. I love me some Broadway.
That's so fun. All right, and Lynn has a question. Can you tell us more about the amusement park they went to? She said she loved that part.
Oh yes, absolutely. So there is two amusement parks actually really close to Camp Green. One was called Lakewood and one was called Liberty Park. And Liberty Park was really little. And so ended up focusing on Lakewood Park, which was had the first wooden roller coaster in Charlotte. It existed between 1900 and 1930, and soldiers would go there all the time on their free time off. They hosted dances at this pavilion that was on the lake, and they had a zoo which had a zebra cow, and I that's included in the book. It's hilarious. In all the Charlotte archives, it would say Lakewood Park, come see the zebra cow. Well, they would paint this cow like a zebra print, and that's that's what happened there. So
Awesome.
there's some scenes in Lakewood. There's one in particular, it's not really a spoiler, where some soldiers break into Lakewood because they just are bored and want to ride on the roller coasters. And so there's some fun scenes in Lakewood, but I wanted to give a comprehensive picture of what life would have been like here. And so that's one of the things that they would have done, is go to Lakewood and go to some of the dances they held every Friday there for the soldiers and for the community, and then also the amusement, like what amusement parks would have been like during that time period. So that's another piece of like forgotten Charlotte history too that was in the Forgotten Charlotte book that I read. And it was really fun to bring that to life because there's so much fun stuff and fun pictures and archives that I got
Oh,
to
I
look
bet.
at to
I
build
mean, and
that.
some of those old dances, like I think, my
You
parents
are
used to go to
perfect for
those.
Charlotte tourism.
Yeah, exactly. Some of those old, oh, my internet saying that I'm stable, so I'm hoping that you're hearing me. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, because it's like, uh-oh, I thought I froze up there for a minute. But some of those old dances and the dance hall stuff, it's like that was it looked like it was so fun. And I know my parents used to do that. It's just like
Hmm.
we didn't have that. It would be kind of fun to have some of that stuff to go to now. All right, ladies, we're about out of time, so I want to
It's how
ask.
people used to meet people.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. Instead of doing online dating, I think we need to bring the dance halls back.
Yeah.
Bring it back.
Bring the dance halls back.
For
Uh,
sure. Let's do it. Who's opening one?
I know. But before we go, Rachel, I want to quickly ask you a couple questions. So first, I want to know what's coming, what's new, and where people can follow you if they want more information about what's going on with Rachel.
Uh, so I think anyone who knows me knows that I wrote a lot of books within a few years, like a few dozen.
They're
And
all amazing, though.
I
Amazing
was
books.
supposed to have a book out last, but it just needed more work. And I needed to be able to screw on my brain to really get. I'm just going to comfortably say now, I believe I suffered a bit of a creative burnout, writing so much on top of my other
Makes
work
sense,
that
yeah.
this one has just needed more time, which thankfully our lovely publisher gave me, because I think they were just like, Rachel, take a step back, because it was just getting too much. So I do have a probably 2020, 2026, I'll have another historical fiction novel out. I just had Liberty Scarf out with my friends Janelle and Amy, which World War One, but
Amazing
set
book.
in Europe. And next year I will also have a biography of Sir Christopher Wren out, which came about because I wrote a book called The London Restoration, and a UK editor read it and said, we'd love to have you write a biography of this architect that you keep going on about. So next year, this year, I'm just getting projects done and learning how to really find that creative spark that I know that I had. But Joy will also tell you, we're often working on really tough things, promoting and doing all these edits and writing, and it can be a lot. So I appreciate everybody's patience, and there are more books coming out. And I know Julie's probably so sick of me right now because it's
No,
like, I
I'm not
don't
at
know,
all.
but they're coming. And even after this, but I've got several historical fiction novels in the works. I want to do another contemporary romance, and I've got this biography, but um, sometimes you just got to be like, okay, screw your brain on again. Let's see how we can tackle this because it was turning into cobwebs up there.
But I love it, and we
I
will
can't
wait
wait.
for
It's
them.
going to be
Yep,
great when it comes.
and we will wait for them. And where will we find you if people want to follow you and find out more about what's going on with you?
I'm still like on Twitter, me and like the two birds that are left because like everybody has deserted that app. But that's where I usually try to help the I don't want to give up on the writing community there because I really do like trying to um make the publishing world less of an enigma from my literary agent job. But my handle everywhere is Rach K Mick, RACHKMC. I'm on Instagram where honestly sometimes it's just a lot of bunny videos. I'm on
Love
Threads as Rach
bunnies.
K Mick. But those are the three places that I usually hang out and tell people what I'm reading. And if I can have one more second to say what I'm reading now or
Yes.
just finished, because the author was just in Toronto last week and I got to meet her in real life. It's called The Lost Baker of Vienna.
Oh, I've
It's
been
by
hearing
Sharon
about that one.
Kurtzman. It's her debut. And when you read in the back of a book, this is based on the author's family story. Well, having coffee with Sharon last week here in the city, I got like the deep dive on like, no, it's actually her mother's story. It is insanely good. And it was just picked up as a Zibby Owens pick. We're going to be seeing it everywhere, and it comes out in August. And everyone go and pre-order it because the story will blow you away. It's so good.
Okay, tell us the title again.
The Lost Baker of Vienna.
Perfect. Okay. We always love those previews. And so Joy, I know we talked about the Star of Camp Green and we talked about the new one coming, but are you working on something else?
You betcha.
Always.
Always.
Do you want to
Yes,
tell us?
I think I don't have it super clear yet. I will just say that it's a really, really fun idea and I'm really excited about it. I'm kind of nailing it down right now. It has to do with um, definitely 40s Hollywood. And I'm just really having a good time like exploring, the first like historical tidbits that I'm including in it are really, really fun. And so hope to tell you guys more about that. But I'll have a year, it actually won't be probably out till 2027. So I'll have
Oh,
a year off, which that's
Probably
cool.
good
You
for
know,
mental health.
exactly.
I
Back
know.
to
Well, that's
Rachel's
the
point
thing.
earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it is true. We wear so many hats now. I think that we have to do so much promotion, and that's a huge part of our job that people don't necessarily realize as authors that we do. We're writing the books, yeah, but
And
then we
and
have to
we
go
love
off
it.
and
And we
write,
love
love it.
it. And you don't want to turn down any writing opportunities because you know how privileged and fortunate you are. And so I would never
Yeah.
turn down like the opportunity, but then it's like
Yeah,
you need to
you
fall in
need to you
love
need to read.
with this creative process again.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But
Joy,
hey, we
where should
all have
people
each other.
yeah. And where should people follow you, Joy, if they want to find out more what's going on with you?
Okay, so on Instagram, I'm at Joy W Cal, and I have TikTok, but I do it really badly. But it's I do have it. And I have Facebook too, but Instagram is where I spend the most time. And then Facebook as well. As Facebook, it's just Joy Callaway author, I think. And so yeah, I'd love to talk to y'all more and follow us. And I know Rachel and I'll team up again and do some other fun stuff. I
Oh,
can't wait
absolutely.
when your book comes out next year or whenever. We got to do some fun virtual events, and maybe
Absolutely.
someday I'll be up near you and I can come out
Yeah,
and see you in person.
that'd be so cool.
Love it.
I'd love that.
Love it, love it, love it. So, ladies, thank you so much. If you could buy
Thanks,
the
Julie.
books from Warwick's, we would appreciate that. But support any independent bookstore that's near you, is what we always like to say. We're a good community of independent bookstores, whether you're in the US or in Canada. So wherever you're at.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Go
And
indies.
Julie, I did want to say before we get going that I will be sending some book plates to you
Okay,
guys. So if you do order from Warwick's, we'll have book plates for those.
perfect. All right. Well, ladies, it was wonderful. Rachel, great seeing you again. Joy, it was wonderful meeting you.
Good to
And
see you all.
Great to
everybody,
see
Julie,
you
I'll see
guys.
you in a month or
I'll
something.
see you in a
I
month.
know.
I think we're back here in a bit.
I think we're
Okay.
back.
Bye,
Happy
everybody.
reading, everybody. Bye.